I had a steep learning curve because I had written for adults, but now I'm going to write for children. I had to explain science for children in a way that I hadn't explained science before. You know, when you're a scientist and you think you know something, you just use some jargon and people will go away. But when you're talking to children, you've got to explain this. And so you have to really make sure you understand it so that you can explain it to them.
Welcome to May Contribute a Verse. I'm Brenna Jennerette, Kidlit author of The Law of Birthdays, an Ella's Way honorable mention, and the upcoming nonfiction picture book, A Bike is Not Just a Bike, illustrated by Michelle Pierio, about how the bicycle helped to usher in the women's revolution. It launches on May 3rd, 2026, and is available for pre-order today through Glue Books. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Munkin, dad, Kidlit author, and science communicator. This episode is proudly sponsored by Canadian children's book publisher Tealmore Press, where every book sold supports reforestation. Check out Tealmore's newest release, When the Sea Left, written by Nadine Holland and illustrated by Krista McGinley. The book explores what would happen if so much trash ended up in the sea it disappeared altogether. Check out this title and the full Tealmore catalog at tealmorepress.com, including titles like Naked, Fungi Are More Than Mushrooms, and Supermoon. Today's guest is the brilliant Ainissa Ramirez. Firmly rooted in the science world, her main goal is writing for kids to give them a mirror to see themselves represented in books and to translate complex scientific topics for kids. She walks us through how she learned to connect those dots for kids. Make sure to look for her first book in the Black Innovator series from Candlewick, Spark, Jim West's Electrifying Adventures in Creating the Microphone, illustrated by Centaur Zigbe, out now. And check out her podcast, Science Underground. Here's Anissa's verse. Well, thank you for coming on the show. We're really excited to chat with you. Josh actually messaged me this morning and was like, she's really like fancy and smart. What's she calling us for? Like, what?
You outed my inferiority complex.
I put on my pants one leg at a time like everybody else.
I have to tell you, it's interesting that you say that, because of all the things that I learned in college, that bit of feedback has probably been the most helpful in making me a mature and well-adjusted adult, is the pants analogy.
Remember,
I didn't make it, but it's definitely, I mean, you know, you meet all kinds of people and they have the same concerns as you do.
And same pants.
Yeah, totally, yeah, same pants. So let's start at sort of the beginning. How did you get into Kidlit? Because for the listening audience, you know, give us a little bit of background on the world you do come from, and then how you got into Kidlit, because that part is fascinating for me.
Sure. So I'm a scientist by training and did that for many years, like over a decade or so. But throughout my science career, I always had outreach programs for young readers and children. So my last gig was at Yale, and we actually had a science program for kids called Science Saturdays, which was based on donuts, demonstrations, and dynamic lectures. And most professors don't do things for the general public, and that was definitely the thing where I actually felt like was my calling. And so I wrote books about science for the general public. And then a couple of years ago, it really dawned on me that where I really could make impact is translating science so that our youngest readers can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, amazing.
What was it that called you to the public outreach? Because, I mean, like you said, most professors don't do this. Why you?
That's a good question. I think it's because my own journey was made possible because someone, you know, sent a flare out and said, this is science. So what put me on the path to becoming a scientist was many, many years ago when I was growing up, there was a show on PBS called 3-2-1 Contact. And
yes, I know that show.
Right.
Amazing.
Exactly. And so someone created that. They're like, let's translate what scientists do by having these kids solve mysteries. And that really touched me. And what really was important to me is that on the show, there were kids of different backgrounds. One of them was an African-American girl. And when I saw her, I saw my reflection. So I think seeing one's reflection is very important to me. And then when I was studying the sciences, there weren't too many people who looked like me. And I said, you know, when I leave or when I finish my degree, I'm going to try and make this path a little easier for other people. And I didn't know what that meant. I thought that meant being a teacher. But overall, it's evolved so that it's more, how do I translate science to the general public? So it's just because of my own path, I think, that spoke to why I decided to do this kind of work.
And So I love that you came from science and then you sort of, you know, met with that like Venn diagram, I guess, of like the general public, and then it sort of focused in on kids. But so then what did you, because I feel like it's fascinating for us to talk to all of our authors and illustrators that come on, like, how did you make it from idea and like inspiration to having an actual book in the world? Like where did you go from there? Because you're like, okay, cool, I want to direct this sort of towards kids and write a children's book, but like you can't just show up and be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get published by the Big Five, or like, or I just like met this agent who loves me, amazing. I mean, sometimes yes, but like, how did that happen for you?
That's a great question. So before I started writing children's books, I was actually writing books for the general audience, for older readers. So I had a book that came out called The Alchemy of Us that came out in 2020. And it was based on science storytelling, where I talk about how technology has shaped us. But instead of just telling you fact after fact after fact, you learn about the person who invented something, and then we learn about how that invention actually changed society. So that was kind of a different approach to how science books are written. And by some great fortune, an editor for children's books read that book and said, you know what, I think she might be good at children's books. Now, it took a long time for me to figure out how to write a children's book. But like I said, I think that the success of The Alchemy of Us was kind of opened up the door for me. It wasn't like I was coming straight out of the blue.
Yeah. Wow. So, okay. So you might actually be one of those stories that was like, oh yeah, I just was sort of, out in the world doing my thing and the editor came to me. That's amazing. How did that interaction happen? Like, did they just reach out to you directly and they were like, hey, what do you think about this? Let's work on this idea together.
Well, like I said, it wasn't as straightforward. It wasn't as easy because I did have to learn a lot to translate science to the younger audiences. But I got a bunch of books that were recommended to read. Do you think you can write something similar to this for children? And some of them I'm like, well, no. And some of them I'm like, well, that doesn't sound too hard, because one was a biography. And I had written, essentially, my book, The Alchemy of Us, was a bunch of biographies. So I said, right. I can write a biography. But now I had to make a biography that was less than 1,500 words and make the science meaningful to children. So there was a lot of self-learning that I had to do in order to get to that point. And I was thinking about the first version that I gave my editor and the book that actually came out are entirely different, because I really had to figure out how to make this interesting to kids and how to tell a story that's compelling to, our youngest audiences. And I did not know how to do that, I would say, 5 years ago.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when you were first saying, you wrote it in a different way than just sort of listing facts, essentially, and like listing, oh, this person did this thing and this is why it was inspiring or whatever. So in, under the Kidlit umbrella, there are these different factions of like, people who are really good at like nonfiction or whatever, like these different pieces. So nonfiction Kidlit authors are always forever looking for like that structure, right? That like through line that isn't just a list. Well, it will transform, or the alchemy will happen to have a callback, that it will make your story into an actual story as opposed to just a list of things. Right. So it sounds like you were sort of doing that initially with The Alchemy of Us anyways. That was, I can see how that was your starting point. Yeah. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was agreeing. Yeah, that was my training ground. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you said, you had to learn a lot between that book and the editor, reaching out and saying, this would be a great way to reach children. So what did you do in there besides reading books? Did you take any classes? Did you reach out to other Kidlit authors? Like, how did you sort of, self-teach teach yourself?
Teach myself.
Get there. Yes. I'm like self-taught, taught.
Right. No, that's a very good question. So first, let me just say that the book it's a biography, which I knew how to do. But what I also did in The Alchemy of Us is I fused science into the biography, and so that you didn't even know you were learning science. So in the picture book world, you have informal science books that will teach you, all about shells, all about snails. And then you also have books that are biographies. Let me tell you about Marie Curie. But my challenge was, and this is what my editor had challenged me to do, is to fuse them so that you had the science embedded, peppered into the book. And so that was new. That was one of the challenges that she gave me, and it was a great challenge. Now, as opposed to how did I learn? Well, I took numerous classes. This is all happening during COVID. And so there was a group of creators called the Black Creators in Kid Lit. And they would have maybe twice a week, editors would come through on Zoom calls, publishers would come, people would teach. They were sort of essentially master classes. In the course of a year, I got a ton of information.
Yes.
And then when I could...
Sorry, can I interrupt just real quick? I'm sorry. Was Valerie Bowling in that class?
She was part of that too. Yes. So there was at least 130 people who were in that, and it was international.
Yes. She has come on the show, and I remember her talking about that, and that is how she actually found her agent, James McGowan. They sort of connected over that. Anyways, I'm sorry. I just wanted to sort of ground
it was
myself
a phenomenal
in what that was. So yeah,
it was
awesome.
it was
Amazing.
a phenomenal creative hub that is only a shadow of itself now. But during COVID, when we couldn't go anywhere for twice a week, you would get access to editors and agents, as you're saying. Like I said, it was essentially a master class. You were getting a master's in children's literature over the course of that year. And then when the libraries opened up, then I would read as many picture books as I could and study them. Like, how did they get that information across? As you mentioned, how do you find that through line? For biographies, which is what I'm doing, it's like, well, how do you make it interesting so that kids want to know about how this person was as a young person and what did they discover? How do you explain that? So I kind of studied it from that point of view. And since I'm a scientist by training, I also went to the chemistry section for kids, which is often very small. And I said, okay, what do kids know? Or what do we want kids to know at this age? And so that kind of bracketed what information I was also going to get across. So it was a lot of I was teaching myself by, reading lots of books. And then again, this wonderful opportunity that just happened during COVID where people just came to my screen and taught me different things that I needed to know.
That's amazing. I've heard, like I was shouting out Valerie Bowling, I've heard nothing but amazing things, coming from that sort of like concentrated, chunk of time for learning it. So so you did all of this self-teaching and learned all of these things. And actually, so we're already, 15 minutes into the show. Shout out the name of your book and, what it's about for the listening audience so we can ground them in that.
The name of the book is Spark, Jim West's Electrifying Adventures in Creating the Microphone. And this book is about the African-American inventor who created something that we all use and don't even know who's created it. And that's the microphone. In fact, the microphone that you're using and I'm using just to chat with each other right now is based on his invention. 2 billion microphones are made every year, and they're based on his invention.
Every year.
Every year. So
easy.
I felt compelled to write his story because many years ago I saw that movie Hidden Figures, and I said, wait,
yes,
exactly. I said, there's got to be way more of these hidden figures. And then I realized I actually met one because before I was a professor, I was a scientist, a junior scientist at Bell Laboratories, and I met Jim West. So I reached out to him. Yeah, I asked him if we could have coffee. I just wanted to hang out. I'm like, hey, can we have coffee? And he's like, yeah, let's do lunch. And I was afraid the whole time. I'm like, am I going to have food dropping from my mouth? Like, because I was just such a fangirl at the time. But I didn't know. I didn't know that was actually putting the seed in the ground for me to meet up with him sometime later and say, hey, I would like to interview you and I'd like your children's book to be written. And would you help me with this?
So wait. Okay. So you reached out and had lunch with Jim West just to hang out. This is before
that was long ago. That was like somewhere in before 2000. So when I was at Bell Laboratories, newly minted scientist trying to reach out to the most famous people, and he said yes. And I was like, oh my goodness. So
right,
I got to have lunch with this guy. I thought he was going to say no, and that's fine. But to meet him, and I don't even know what we talked about. I think I was just like, in awe the whole time.
You're just staring.
Staring
just
and trying not to look
say
stupid.
Whatever.
Yeah. Trying not to say anything stupid. Maybe just nod my head.
Right.
And then I see Hidden Figures, the movie. I think that's around 2015. And I'm like, this is amazing. Wait, I met a hidden figure. Let me reach out to Jim and see if he's interested in chatting. And so that's where the book, the idea for the book kind of came from. I had a steep learning curve because I had written for adults, but now I'm going to write for children. I had to explain science for children in a way that I hadn't explained science before. When you're a scientist and you think you know something, you just use some jargon and people will go away. But when you're talking to children, you've got to explain this. And so you have to really make sure you understand it so that you can explain it to them. So I had to undergo that process and then learn to write children's book by reading a lot of them.
So when you reached back out to Jim West, many years later, what was his reaction when you were like, hey, I have this idea, like, let's do this children's book together?
Well, I had kind of kept in touch because I had a podcast and I interviewed him twice on that podcast. So my email wasn't completely out of the blue. But this time I had a different request. And I'll also add that, we're recording this is October 2025. Jim West is 94. He did this work in the late 60s. So I also felt like he should have had a picture book for some by now because, like I said, 2 billion microphones are made.
Real missed opportunity, right?
Yeah. So
Man.
I also felt like when I was suggesting books that I wanted to write, my first thinking was we have to get Jim West his book. He deserves his book.
Wow. Yeah. Amazing.
It is interesting, this navigation of writing books about people who are still alive. And clearly it seems to have been a priority for you to get this, to the extent that it's in your control, to get this out for Jim to be able to see. But I think the question, a lot of people who do engage in nonfiction writing, I mean, it's a weird process. It's a weird process even for a journalist to be able to approach a source and say, can I ask you these questions? To approach that with a level of legitimacy as a children's book author that says, like, I haven't published a book for kids before, but let's see if we can give this a try. It takes a degree of humility, I guess, for you, aided by the fact that you did have this history with Jim already and had tried out some other things.
Well, Jim is a very approachable guy. He knows the importance of spreading the importance of science and science education. So, and also he's a scientist. He's generally very curious. So it wasn't out of the blue for me to say, hey, I have this crazy idea. What do you think about it? He wouldn't be like, oh, I don't have time for that. He's very generous with his time. He mentors kids all the time. When I say kids, I mean students. So, and actually he created a program for interns at Bell Laboratories. So he knows it's about forward-thinking research for himself, but also to reach down and grab the next generation and pull them up. So when I had said that I wanted to write this children's book, he said, yeah, that's a good idea.
Sounds good for me.
That's amazing.
But also he gets why you might want to do that. Yeah.
He gets it. And what was so great is when the book finally arrived, when I got that box of books, the first thing I did is I rushed to FedEx to send him his copy. And then of course I sent 2 copies to my mom. But I wanted him to make sure that he saw that kids are going to see the impact of his work. And I just sent him an image yesterday. I had a bunch of kids in a bookstore, and we were all talking about Jim West. And I printed out sheets of paper that said, "Thank you, Jim West." And we all took pictures with the signs. And so I sent it to him.
It's the best.
That's amazing. So, yeah.
I have an 8-year-old, and we're still enjoying picture books, and we're drifting a lot further into the real world and real people and real biographies. And one favorite that we have now is Wanda Hears the Stars. I don't know if you've consumed that one yet, Ainissa, but
yeah, I've heard about it.
It is about Wanda Diaz-Merced. Yeah, and she's a co-author, and I bring that up to ask, what part of telling his story, aside from being the subject who you interviewed, was Jim in the creation of the book?
Well, he was aware that I was writing the book. I interviewed him at least 4 or 5 times, asking for other details about how he was as a child. When I was writing it, I'm like, oh, I don't know much about how he was when he was in high school. I got to call Jim. So he wasn't a collaborator per se, but he was the source, and he was aware of why I was writing these things. Some of his papers are at the Bell Labs archives, so I was able to get some of those materials as well. And when I asked Jim about his invention, he created this microphone, but it's a little on the complicated side. And when Jim explained it to me, it was going straight over my head. Couldn't get it. So I reached out to his best friend, who was also his collaborator at Bell Labs. His name is Gerhard Sessler. He lives in Germany, and reached out to him. And he's like, oh, we're writing a book about Jim? Great. I said, can you explain what you invented? And he did, and it was fantastic. So not only did I interviewed Jim, but I interviewed people who were in his circle as well to get a sense of what he built, but also what his character was like.
Yeah, I love that. So sort of on that, in that same vein, like how many goes did you have to take to get to sort of a finished product, or get to that draft where you had that through line that kids were going to connect with, as opposed to just that list of facts?
Well, I was working chronologically, so I had the through line, but it was a matter of what was the theme of the book, and also, can I make the prose as lyrical as possible. So the first version, so when I talked to Jim, I talked to him a couple of times and I said, hey, Jim, how would you explain yourself as a child to another person? And he's like, oh, I always did the opposite. And so I played with this idea of the opposite man. And my editor's like, okay, this is interesting, but it was really a flop. She was just being nice. Mm. And then I tried other incarnations to try and get the theme about him. And then I finally landed on Spark, which is not only about electrical engineering, which is part of the things that he was studying, but also the inspiration and the curiosity. Like the theme was him being very, very curious. So it took me a while to get to what the theme was. And then once I got there, then I could polish the language so that it's more lyrical and more appealing to the ear, not just to fact. Like he did this. Not that way. And also the book is, I was very fortunate to work with this great illustrator. He did a great job of marrying the words with the illustrations. And the reason why I was fortunate is that Setter also has a technical background. So he knew what I was talking about in the art notes and could apply them. So there weren't a lot of iterations in terms of making the images great. He knew what I was talking about.
That's really helpful. Yeah, to have someone who knows the subject matter, because that's another sort of nuance of writing nonfiction, especially in picture books, that I don't think is highlighted enough. Like, if you don't have somebody who is either from that world or is willing to sort of like do that deep dive research, it can really do a disservice to, the product you're trying to portray, because you want it to be as true as it can be. So kids are really getting that double whammy of the verbiage and the image to put together, like, oh, that's what that is. Got it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it does take a lot of work. So there was one image where Jim had plugged something into a socket that was part of a light, and the illustrator had drawn something, but it wasn't completely correct. So I had to go to a museum in Schenectady, which is it has a range of catalogs from the 90s that shows different types of sockets. So, and I said, hey, do you have this kind of socket? They sent me a picture, and then I sent it to the illustrator. So it's so there's a lot of thought in these images.
Yeah.
I often think, there's so much that goes into being a children's book illustrator, but I often think of, this is too reductive, and I say this jokingly, but how much more simple it would be if you just decided stylistically to be an abstract illustrator. It would remove so much need for you to be, have technical accuracy in what you're trying to represent.
Right. Sometimes I envy fiction writers, although I know there's tons of work that one has to do in building a world. But I'm like, gosh, when you're trying to be accurate, you actually have to go to the archives and dig.
But then you got to be the inventor if you're doing fiction. Yeah.
That's right. Neither one's. Yeah. They are looking at us and they're like, well, you have facts to rely on, and I have to use my imagination. So everyone thinks the grass is greener.
Totally. They're both like so challenging in such different ways, because we were talking earlier about how you can't just, in a nonfiction children's book specifically, you can't just list facts. Like, that's not going to fly. You really have to dig deep to figure out, how am I going to like turn this story inside out and like tell kids about it in a way that they're like, oh, I'm interested in that. Like, like this guy invented microphones. It's very cool. Like, we find it fascinating. The kids are like, that's cool, I guess. But like with the spark and like the curiosity, like that can build. And that's, I just feel like that is the piece that takes the most time in nonfiction, is to really like excavate what that is. Like, how can I connect with the kid? Like, what is the most fascinating?
How am I going to make this relevant for people who don't necessarily care about, the construction of a microphone? Yeah.
Right. And how are we going to care about the character? So the thing about Jim is that he was a rambunctious little boy. He used to take things apart. And so when I would do school readings, I'm like, does anybody take stuff apart? Do you get in trouble for it? And some people will raise their hands, and I'm like, oh, you're like Jim West, And there is an occasion where he plugs something in and electricity goes through his body. So there is an accident. He survives, of course. But, there's some thrill in the book as well. So, I try and instill that so that I keep grabbing children's attention so that they want to learn more about him.
Yeah. Wow. It's time for this week's book reviews. Josh's review for this week is for Winsome Bingham's The Walk, illustrated by E.B. Lewis in a realistic, painterly style, very evocative of Winsome's earlier book, Soul Food Sunday, also a favorite. The Walk is about a community coming together to do their civic duty and vote. They move as one, a crescendo of human connection, moving forward with hope. It has an inquisitive perspective and a couple of really powerful nods to current events. Nods that reinforce to the grown-ups reading the book that our country is far from perfect and requires constant effort, forward movement, to protect our rights. And my review for this week is for Every Monday MABEL by Jashar, Awan. For a book with so few words, man, does this one pack a punch. It's full of curiosity, fun, and so much heart. As a reader, I was endeared to Mabel and her Monday morning routine immediately. Maybe more so when no one in her family seemed to get it or rally behind this sweet kid who loves the trash truck. You'll fall in love with Mabel and maybe even Mondays right away. Don't forget to get your own reviews and library requests in. It's the #1 way to help an author's sales. And if you want to support the pod, make sure to check out our Linktree at linktree/verseshow to give a community shout out, buy merch, or become a Patreon. And now, back to our show.
You're reacting to my teeing up my thought. I want to connect this more structurally to the podcast that you do and just the science communication in general. I do want to keep talking about the book, but I guess more structurally, how naturally attuned in EQ terms do you feel like you are, or has it taken a long time for you as a scientist to feel comfortable with the digestion of topics into bite-sized chunks for lay-person audiences?
I so love that question because the ability to write a children's book right now is part of my own evolution. 15 years ago, when I was sitting in a laboratory at Yale, the types of things that I wrote about were very, very dense language, journal articles, scientific journal articles, where you have as many facts as you can in one sentence, because essentially you're giving a recipe so that someone can repeat what you've done, and you want to, brag about what you've done, but you want to use language where it's not too braggy. So that's kind of the world that I was in. So very, very dense language, beautiful language, but very, very dense language. And then I had to learn how to move away from that so that I can have language that describes, but it's just enough for people to understand. It's not necessarily like all the details as I used to write about in my journal articles. A 10-year journey to do that. I've written other books. When I left academia, I wrote a book about football, and I was teamed up with a sports writer, and I learned about the beauty of sports writing. It's a lot of fun to write in that genre, and I kind of funneled that into my own way of writing. And so when I got my chance to write on my own, which was The Alchemy of Us, my personality fused into that book as well as the science, because I saw that both of them were necessary when I wrote the other book. But for children's books, and then after that, I did podcasting. So I had a podcast called Science Underground, where I distilled information in 2 minutes. And that was the education that I needed so that I can do children's books. How do I get to the main point, the salient thing that you can hang your hat on so that you understand it? And so I did that for about a year and a half. Those podcasts, it's still around, but it really taught me so I can figure out how to distill information so that anyone can understand it. So like I said, it was my own journey. I wish someone gave me a map and said, okay, if you want to be a scientist that can write children's books, what you need to do is you need to talk to a sports writer, write your own book, do some podcasting, and then you'll be able to get to this point. But I had to kind of figure it out on my own.
That's a long and squiggly dotted line.
But it was fun. It was fun, and it's one of those things like in improv. They say, yes, and so something comes along, and you're like, I think this is part of my own journey, that my own process as a writer. And I also try not to write the same thing. So I wrote The Alchemy of Us. It did pretty well. People were like, hey, is there going to be an Alchemy of Us 2? And I think I could write that. I think it'd be not easy, but I would know how to do it. But I don't think that helps me grow as a writer. I have to figure out the next thing.
Right. I sometimes wonder that about, and Dave Pelkey comes to mind immediately because I have an 8-year-old who loves graphic novels and just will read anything Dave Pelkey writes. But I wonder, because he is so prolific in the Dogman universe. Mm-hmm. But, he has to make it kind of fun for himself, too. And I wonder, how he feels about expanding that universe, year after year after year, because the series does so well. So, dear Dave Pelkey, I would love to have you on the show. We'd love to hear about it.
That's right.
Yeah, like you're saying, I wonder that about my own writing, too. If, I had a book come out, if I loved it enough and I was like, this, I saw so many other adventures within this world, or I'd like to explore this piece of, you know, this character, then it feels like, oh yeah, that would be fun. Like I'd have the like enthusiasm and the energy to sort of do that. But I think if I didn't, you know, I could do it, but it might come off a little flat. Like I don't think I'd have, you know, I wouldn't have the push to like make it the thing that it was the first time around, because I've already learned that thing. So
right. It's like homework.
Yes, right. You're like, I can do it. There's this other thing that I'm like way more excited about. So it's like, you know, how do you sort of balance that anyway?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, when I was sorry.
Yeah. Well, homework, except for in the case of Dave Pilkey, the homework that comes with truckloads of money, which is probably pretty darn good.
Well, everybody has a different journey. You know, everybody has a different journey. I have to say that the whole time I was writing The Alchemy of Us, I was afraid the whole time, because I'm like, is this going to work out? So if I were to do it, I wouldn't. Maybe that fear is what made me so intentional and deliberate, and made me want to make sure that everything was as right as possible. So if I knew how to do that already, then I wouldn't have that same motivation. I would love to be able to do sequels. That sounds great.
Right. Well, and the fear is kind of like the other side of like the thrill, right? It's that sort of like adrenaline rush, like, oh God, is it going to work out? And then you're like, oh, it did. Like, oh, yeah. Okay. Like, exactly. You know, it's sort of like they're like one and the same. So I wanted to kind of just readdress. So the editor came to you and thought, okay, you can write this children's book. Like, let's do this, let's sort of collaborate. And then you collaborated with Jim. You did the whole book. So was there an agent that came in at any point in time? Are you connected that way? Or did you sort of just have you did. Because I was going to say, did you just have the great fortune to go straight to the editor and just be like...
No. I know that happens. I know that happens. But no, I had an editor that I had just signed up with. When I wrote The Alchemy of Us, I didn't do that with an editor. I mean, with an agent. So, but I had just signed up with an agent and then was pursuing this world of children's books. And so she was able to usher that contract through the process.
So is it an agent that does your adult books and your children's books as well?
Yes. I don't have any books for older readers yet, but she'd be well primed to do that. In fact, that's her specialty.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. It's great to have both, you know.
Mm-hmm. I like how you frame that. Books for older readers.
You don't want to say books for adults because it sounds a little bit more nefarious than I mean.
Yeah, that makes the tone of The Alchemy of Us much more salacious.
Very different. It's not that kind of book.
No, that's a sequel.
So do you have any other children's books in the works then? Like, is this something you're going to stay in or, you know, stay on track with? Like, will you?
Well, it ends up that when I signed up with Candlewick MIT Kids Press, I actually doing a 3-part series, the Black Innovator series. So this is the first one to come out, October 2025. Very cool. Yes. And then the second one, which is in the process, is going to come out next year. And it's about Gladys West. She has the same last name as Jim West, but they're not related. And she...
Okay, I was going to be like, wait, tell me everything. No.
Yeah, but she is a mathematician. She's also in her 90s. So again, motivation to get these books out so that people can see that kids can honor them as well. But she is a Black woman mathematician who had a hand in shaping GPS.
Wow, cool.
So another hidden figure.
Yeah. Also very appropriately named.
Sorry?
Very appropriately named. If her last name is West and she's working on GPS.
Yes. So the name of the book is North, South, East, and Gladys West.
That's amazing.
Love that. So clever. Amazing.
That is just a gift.
Yeah, so you can't, the universe gives you a gift and you got to use it.
Yeah.
Okay, but so were you also able to collaborate with Gladys? And then also sub-question for after, what's the third book about?
Okay,
I'm so like intrigued.
What other West?
There's no other West. That's it. That's the second and last
Kanye
West.
West is not somebody we want to write about.
We don't want to write that book. No, don't. We don't mention that. So I did interview her a couple of times via Zoom, and one time I had a list of questions, and her daughter was very helpful. She, she recorded her responses to the questions because she's getting up there in age. So and she recently wrote her autobiography. I want to say maybe 3 years ago. She self-published her autobiography, and she co-wrote it with a journalist. So I also reached out to him and spoke to him, and I spoke to a lot of mathematicians and folks at NOAA so I can learn more about GPS. So a lot of research. In fact, I think I did way more research for that book than Jim West's book, and that comes out next year. And then the last book is about a early 20th century inventor, and his name is Garrett Morgan. Garrett Morgan is known, every Black History Month, Garrett Morgan is known as the inventor of the stoplight, or early version of a stoplight. But he also created a gas mask, an early gas mask. And there's a story behind how he created this gas mask. He saved a lot of people, but he didn't get credit for it. So I kind of tell the story about that invention.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have a year for that one? Do we know when that one comes out?
That is probably in 2 years' time. 2 years.
Yeah, I feel like you need some time in between. These are like really heavily researched books. Like you need a minute to sort of put them together.
No, they're written.
Oh,
they're written.
Well,
yeah, they're written. It's not me. It's the illustrators.
It's not me. It's you. Yeah, it's the publisher. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that.
The illustrators are very, very busy, and it takes about a year or so for them to do their. So it's slated for about 2 years. But the prose, as I know it, is in the can.
Awesome. Wow.
We're getting a sense for your level of hustle and dedication, and I had no illusions that.
I don't know. I don't know what to do with myself. I guess that's the take home.
Yeah, more books.
More books. Yeah.
So this is like a 3-book sort of series of nonfiction. Do you have any like aspirations to dabble in the fiction side of Kidlit, or are you very much focused on nonfiction right now? And sort of what do you see coming next, or like what do you want to do next?
That's a great question. So I didn't mention, so that's the 3-part series from Candlewick, called the Black Innovator series. Candlewick also has another book with me, and it's a one-off. It's called How Atoms Make Friends, and it's a chemistry book.
I love that.
It's a chemistry book where we compare the bonds between atoms and the bonds between humans. So there's a sharing bond, and that's a very strong bond. There's a give and take bond. It's a very temperamental bond, because if people aren't getting what they need, they want to get out of there. There's a community bond. So it's as I mentioned, I spent a lot of time looking at the chemistry section of children's books, and I just didn't find ways for kids to connect with the material that they're trying to share. It's more than just explosions. Let's learn about atoms. Let's get to know them. Like, what's their world like? And so that's the reason why I wrote that. And the last book, which is not with the Candlewick, but with Charles Bridge, it's called There's the Rub. And it's about the hidden world of friction. So
is this part of their STEAM series?
I don't know if it's part of their STEAM series. Yeah, but it's it's a STEAM book. They do have a STEAM series. Yeah. They have a math series. Yeah. I don't know if it's part of that. But long ago, 2,000 years ago, when I was a graduate student, I studied friction. I studied this world called tribology. Very, very boring topic. Very, very boring topic. And I had to figure out how to make it interesting, because I would give talks on this topic. And so I learned that there's many occasions where friction occurs, but we don't even know about it. And I started to put some in a narrative, like what is our life what is the day in the life of friction? So, when we brush our teeth, we use friction. When we tie our knots, the knots are held together with friction. When we step in snow and you hear that crunch, that's friction. When you hear crickets creak, that's because their wings and legs are rubbed together. That's friction. So I wanted to show the beauty of friction, if you will, so that kids can have another appreciation of it, because most books about friction, like I said, tribology is a very dry topic and people just report it out that way. And it doesn't have to be. It actually can be a beautiful book.
Wow.
Yeah, when you put it in those super practical, very kid-friendly terms. Absolutely.
Yeah. When you're riding on a swing, that squeak, that's friction. And when you hear a squeaky door, especially now that it's almost Halloween, that's friction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Halloween is a holiday based on friction.
It is.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, exactly. I love the way you think. It's exactly it. It's the month of friction. Exactly. So.
Right. Yeah. Like happy friction.
Happy Friction Day. Boo.
Yeah, exactly. That boo is making friction in my mouth against my throat. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh my gosh, well, I'm so glad I asked, because I did not realize. I mean, we're only talking about the one book, that's the one that we thought we would talk about, but you have all of these others coming out, and you clearly have a mind, in the science world. So my
so your question is like, would I love to
writing
do
fiction?
I would love to, but I think my bag is making science fun. And I don't want it to be the dry stuff that we all suffered through.
Right.
My personal mission is to make others people's journey in science better than my own, where it was dry and you had to learn facts and you didn't understand why were you learning this? Like, why am I learning this? Why am I being graded on this? So I have a couple of other books that are in the works that are science-based, like, hydrogen finds a home, like, just so I can talk about the periodic table, things like that. So that's fiction, but it still has like this science undertone.
I mean, you obviously have no shortage of ideas, and we need these children's books, so it makes sense. Yeah, like stay in that nonfiction world. Like, and I was gonna sort of like it's a half comment, half question, but like it seems like you've gotten really good at finding these themes, as we were talking about earlier, like the way to sort of connect with the kid without just it being this fact-based sort of like boring, dry thing that everybody, has seen over and over and over again. So that's sort of my observation. But also the question part is, do you feel that way? Like, has it gotten easier? Like, are you sort of looking at these topics being like, I see it now, like this is something that will connect with kids? Or is it still sort of taking you as long to get to that point where you're like, this is the thing. Okay, got it.
Well, that's a great question. I think that my lens is that I have a smart 12-year-old in my body, and so
amazing.
So, I'm trying, not my physical body, just inside. And so I'm trying to figure out, and I know science, and sometimes I guess the premise is that I want to share science with people. And I know that sharing it as I used to when I was a scientist isn't going to work. I'll always have this hook.
Scalable, at least, right?
Sorry?
Is not scalable, at least. I mean, the way you do science in that dry sense has a purpose in the academic
It has a different
realm.
purpose. Yeah. And you're sharing information, but it's a different audience. But what I want to do, I'm kind of in that in-between world where I want to translate from one world to the other. And in that translation, I'm like, well, what's important to this new audience? Because what worked for the other audience is not going to work for this audience. And so sometimes I stumble on something. A couple of years ago, I went to a national park in Florida and learned some story. And I'm like, hey, where's the picture book for that? So sometimes I stumble on that. And then sometimes I'm just like, well, how can I make this interesting? What's the hook? So it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to call it out explicitly, I mean, you have what we've counted now 5 books in varying stages of completion. Are you finding this process to be lock-in with the way that you're thinking? Are you finding that the way that the publishing industry works jives with how you explore and want to explain these concepts? Because the degree of success that you are seeing certainly seems impressive. You're finding your niche.
Well, thank you for that. I am frustrated like most people, because I have way more ideas. I have way more ideas. I have about 20 children's picture books that are done and they can't find homes. So
I feel this.
Yes, I feel fortunate that some of the books that I've written have landed. And I feel fortunate that they are important to me. Like, I wanted to get Jim's book out there, not just for him, but I wanted kids to see their reflection. So they're important in that way. But no, I have way more on the docket and they can't find homes. And my agent is like, we can't figure out what are people looking for? We don't know. And so sometimes I'm leaning towards self-publishing, and I might self-publish a couple of ideas just because you just can't wait for people to figure it out.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just want to find a home.
Sometimes
you just want it out there. Yeah.
Right. Just like hydrogen. He needs a home.
Hydrogen needs a home. And hydrogen may have to find a self-published home because nobody, and I understand
hydrogen, we got you.
We got hydrogen. We're on it. I understand what the issue is. It's like, all right, so I'm in the business of translating science, and that's because science needs to be translated. So those who are in these positions of bringing books into the world may not know that this is an important issue. Maybe they have a different approach to science or learned science a certain way. So I understand what I'm bumping against.
There's the rub. Yes.
There's the rub. Exactly. So, I'm trying to fix that problem. Yeah.
And I am not, this is not at all to say like, I'm glad that you're having that frustration, but it gives me some solace. Like you're really good at this thing that you do, clearly, and you've got 5 books coming out, but you still are sort of in it with the rest of us. It's the pants analogy all over again. You're still feeling those same frustrations of publication, the same, frustration of finding a home and like making sure these things that you really care about get out into the world. So I just appreciate you sharing that with us, because, you don't always see that from the outside. It just looks like, oh, she just showed up and is super successful. So,
no, not at all. Not at all. No, maybe celebrities have that where someone knocks on their door and says, I'll write it for you. Just put your name on it. But no, it's not that at all. Right. It's not that at all.
This is interesting. And I wonder the degree to which you feel, as you felt with embarking on the writing journey, with wanting to see people like you represented in fiction, as well as communicating science. I wonder the degree to which, publishing industry issues are things that are things that needles that we can move. But I mean, in the same evening that I read a book on Wanda Diaz-Merced or Jim West to my child, I can read another 2-3 books about kids that want to be famous and wanting to be superstars. And I wonder if you think about that as part of this conversation, because the publishing industry has to think about what's going to be read, what's going to be sold, what's going to look attractive on shelves. And we as authors and we as people with passion for certain ideas, it doesn't always jive. And it doesn't always jive necessarily with what people, in order to feed their brains in the right way, should be consuming. So I wonder if you think about that dichotomy and whether or not Jim West should be considered a superstar in the same way that Taylor Swift should be, for example.
Well, that's a great question. Jim West certainly should be. So when you think of the evolution of the microphone, you hear Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, ... Jim West. He's in the same lineage. So yes, he should certainly be up there. But Taylor Swift makes great songs, so, people don't know him as well. Although her songs are transmitted through a microphone made by Jim West, so,
Right.
That's all I have to say. She has Jim West to thank for her $1 billion.
Yeah.
So I don't think we should write for the market. Your imagination is too important to the world to constrain it to what's going on right now, because what's popular right now and you write for it, by the time your book comes out, what was popular right now doesn't exist anymore. And as artists, we should be forward thinking. What do people need to know? We shouldn't be limited by what we're seeing. So that has some downsides. You've got to convince a lot of people that this is a great idea, even though they can't see it. So we have to be good stewards of our ideas. So no, kids want to be influencers, and it's because that's what they see. But if you tell, 2 days ago, I met a little boy who was certainly very nerdy, and I say that in a loving way because I'm a nerd. And I saw him and I said, hey, you know what? You look like the next Jim West. And, he smiled. So,
amazing.
You have a better chance of being Jim West than being Taylor Swift, sorry. So I think we need to give children options, because being an influencer, there's some downsides to that. Not everybody is very happy being an influencer, but Jim West is one of the happiest people I know, because every day he gets to use his curiosity and make something new. And that's a gift.
Yeah. If there's struggle inherent in being a scientist and a creative problem solver, it's a creative struggle. It's not a struggle against, how many people want your attention.
Right. No, you're not worried about followers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Thank God.
Thank you, Jesus. Right.
Please.
Please don't. Less followers, please. Just leave me alone.
Yeah. Stop following me.
Yeah.
Following is bad.
Right? You're making it weird. Okay.
Speaking of people following you and being, wanting your attention, I do wonder the degree to which, especially with the Jim West book, if you think about whether you're giving kids tacit permission to take their granddad's pocket watches apart or destroy them.
I should put a clause in there. I have no. I'm not related. Don't try that. Look, if you take it apart, that's on you.
All right, please don't call me.
Yeah.
Parents,
in fact,
put
the
your
next
valuables out
sentence
of
says
reach.
that he got in trouble, so you didn't read. It says he took this apart and then he got in trouble. So that's on you. Yeah.
Well, we are. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, yes. I was going to ask, too, about, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, you're a podcaster, but you're also a public speaker. And that's an emotional intelligence and storytelling thing that it's a version of authorship. It's a version of being sensitive to ways that your audience needs to receive communication that you're trying to give. Do you think about public speaking in the same way, doing it for the same purpose? And is it something that comes naturally to you? Because for so many of us, the willingness to engage would probably understandably stop at the written word versus putting yourself out in front of, like in your example, a TED Talk size audience.
Oh, well, that's a whole different podcast. But yeah, so I am certainly an introvert, and I define introvert like, how do I get fed? And I get fed when I'm not with people. Like less people, I'm better, you know? But I can turn it on and turn it off. And maybe it's because I'm originally from New Jersey. Everybody's a character from New Jersey. So, you know, I don't have a problem being on stage. That doesn't scare me anymore. And I think, you know, maybe that's like my mom doesn't have that problem. My brother doesn't have, maybe that's a genetic thing. But it's the same thing. It's that desire to share. And so maybe I'm sharing a story. Most of the times I've been giving keynotes, I'm really trying to impress upon people that knowing science is important. I don't want you to become a scientist, but know science so that you can have agency, so you can make decisions for yourself. And here are all the cool things that are happening. And you might not know about it because it's not being covered. But look, we're going to discover it together. So I'm trying to get people more in touch with their inner scientists. And I love doing that because I think everyone, as I mentioned, everyone has a smart 12-year-old and they want to know what's going on in the world. And they don't want to be told what it is, but they want to discover it. And the same thing with storytelling. We show and we don't tell because we want people to discover it at the same time as our characters are as well. So I see some parallels to that, to the storytelling in my prose and in my keynote addresses. And what I've started to do recently, and this is only maybe in the last year, is when I put together my keynote addresses, there's actually a hero's journey. It's like, you know, there's something that's like the hook, and then we go on this journey together, and then there's kind of like this climax, and then we just kind of, you know, there's this ending. I've kind of designed talks like that just to see, just as an experiment to see if the hero's journey works for presentations as well. And the last time I did it, it actually worked okay. I'm like, oh, well, this is a great model that I can use to everything is a hero's journey now to me.
Because to your point, I mean, what you're doing is not trying to just fire hose information at people. You're trying to bring them along with you. And
that's right.
So that everybody's inner 12-year-old has that same sense of discovery, right, and not just receipt. Right.
And you tell the story because you want the information to go in deeper and be part of their own person. Because if you have information, and I'm just telling you information, it'll go in one ear and out the other. In fact, very famous
ownership.
There's no ownership. Well, there's a famous speaker, Les Brown. He'll say, "Okay, cover your left ear," and he's like, "I'm going to say something. The reason why I have you cover your left ear is that I don't want it to go out the other ear." That's how information that has no emotional connection goes through our bodies. We just swallow it and it leaves, you know? But if it's part of a story, or you're learning about the keynote, or if you're learning about this character, or hydrogen is seeking a home, which we all want, then you learn that information, that science information that I've squeezed in there, that I've peppered in there in a way that's more meaningful. And that's essentially what we're in the business of. We're trying to make more information have more meaning.
That is like the core of kidlit writing, I feel like. You know, you're trying to attach this story to an emotional sort of response in your audience so that they do grab onto it and are like, I love this character, or that's so interesting, or I need to know more, which is, like that really is what it is. Fiction, nonfiction, graphic novel, like whatever you're writing. If you can bring the kid in, that's the thing that's going to sell the book or get you an audience. Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, we are up to the hour, and I just want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And this was so just so fascinating to learn about all of the ins and outs of your books and everything coming up. I'm very excited for your whole series. The Jim West book is amazing. And it drops this month, but what is the actual date?
It came out on Tuesday, October 21st. So it's out now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's out now.
So it's out. So
whoa, this week as of recording. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, so check it out. Get, request it from your library, buy it for a friend, spread it around because it's a really important story. And look for all of Ainissa's books coming out in the next couple of years because there will be so many.
Bunch.
I can't wait to see if hydrogen finds a home. But thank you again for coming on. This has been amazing.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been great chatting with you. These questions have been amazing, and I really love what you guys are doing.